Welcome everyone to this second Missing Pillar talk on working together, culture, place and partnership for sustainable development. The Missing Pillar talks are a series of talks on culture's contribution to sustainable development brought to you by the British Council in partnership with the UK Commission for UNESCO and Culture Committee of the United Cities and local governments. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Angie, and before we get started, there are some housekeeping notes we would like to share with you. The discussion with speakers will last an hour, followed by 30 minutes breakout sessions that you will be invited to join. As participants, please make sure that you stay on mute throughout this panel discussion and preferably switch off your cameras for technical ease. The speakers will be spotlighted on your screens alongside the BSL interpreter. This panel discussion is being recorded, but the breakout rooms will not be. This is to support freer discussion. We will share this recording on our website after the event. This free event is a British Council sign language interpreted by Katie and Eddie and live captioned by Kim and Kat. A BSL interpreter will be spotlighted and signing throughout the event. To see the interpreter when the video is shared, click Options at the top of your screen and select Side by Side. For live captioning, please press the live transcript button at the bottom of Zoom. If you require any technical assistance throughout the session, please send a direct message to the technical support team in the chat and they will try to help. Throughout the event, we'll also be sharing announcements in the chat. So thank you also for sharing your questions and links to relevant projects and reports during registration, which have informed the content of this event. If you have any questions or comments for the speakers, please share them in the chat and they'll be picked up by our team and addressed during the panel, breakout rooms, or after the event. If you would like to save the chat and any useful links locally on your computer at the end of the talk, click on Chat. In the corner of the chat window, click the three dots, then press Save Chat. We also invite you to join in the conversation online using the hashtag #TheMissingPillar. Relevant handles for speakers will also be shared in the chat and you can follow us at British Arts. Now that all the guidance has been shared, I'm pleased to hand over to Rosanna Lewis, Culture and Development Lead for the British Council.
Hi.
Hello, and welcome to this Missing Pillar talk on working together, culture, place and partnership for sustainable development. My name is Rosanna and I will be your moderator for today. For those who may be visually impaired, I'm a white woman in my mid-30s, working from my home office here in Brussels, and I have a green British Council background behind me. So I'd like to start by reminding ourselves of some of the key recent milestones. 2021 marked the UN International Year of Creative Economy for Sustainable Development. And last Friday, we celebrated the World Day for Cultural Diversity for Dialogue and Development. And the next UN High-Level Political Forum in July will focus on sustainable and resilient recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And in the UK, local and national elections took place earlier this month, and the All-Parliamentary Party Group on the UN Sustainable Development Goals has opened an inquiry into the UK's progress on aligning the climate and the SDG agendas. So it's a very timely moment for us to have this conversation, and we're pleased to host this second Missing Pillar talk on working together. It's part of a series of events exploring what role arts, culture and heritage can play in today's world to shape a brighter future. The first Missing Pillar talk focused on heritage and sustainable development. Learning from the past, shaping the future, which is available to watch online on our website. You can also read our Missing Pillar report to find out more about our work in this area and the key recommendations on better understanding of the SDGs, measuring impact, and advocating for culture as the missing pillar of sustainable development. So today we will be looking at how people, organisations, and decision makers can work together in pursuit of sustainable development through culture. And we'll be exploring different places and contexts and bridging the gap between policy and practice. Where are we going? Who plays what role, and what actions can be taken? So I'm very pleased to have 4 inspiring speakers with me today, who I will now briefly introduce and ask to say a quick hello and describe themselves for any visually impaired participants. So we have with us today Sophie Howe, who's the Future Generations Commissioner for Wales. Her role is to provide advice to the government and other public bodies in Wales on delivering social, economic, and environmental and cultural well-being for current and future generations, as well as assessing and reporting on how they are delivering. So over to you, Sophie.
Prynawn da. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sophie Howe, the Future Generations Commissioner. I am a white woman. I am in my early 40s, and I am sitting in my attic in between my 2 children's bedrooms. One over here you might be able to see is Generation Alpha, and one over here is Generation Z.
Great, thank you, Sophie. We also have Claire McColgan, MBE, Director of Culture, Liverpool City Council, and Claire is responsible for many aspects of local cultural activity and policy, and is currently leading on the recovery for Liverpool, including the Without Walls Culture Fund and the recently held government events pilot. She sits on the City Region's Cultural Partnership and the Visitor Economy Board, and is a Town Centre Commissioner for the City Region. She previously managed the participation programme Creative Communities and the Capital of Culture and its legacy programme in Liverpool. Thank you, Claire, for being with us today.
Hi, hello everyone, really lovely to be here. And my name is Claire McColgan. I'm sitting in the beautiful Cunard building in Liverpool. I've got a picture of the Library building behind me. I'm a white woman in my very, very early 50s. And I'm sitting here on the waterfront and really looking forward to talking to you in a minute.
Great, thank you, Claire. We also have David Bryan, who's a management consultant with over 30 years experience working with the voluntary and public sectors, including the arts. He is currently chairs Battersea Arts Centre, Voluntary Arts and Brixton House, and he's director of Dunraven School Educational Trust. He has recently been appointed to the Commission for Diversity in the Public Realm by the Mayor of London. So nice to have you with us today, David.
Pleased to be here. Welcome, everybody. My name's David Bryan, as Rosanna's already said. And in terms of my descriptions, I'm a bald black man with a grey beard sitting in my house in London, which from the backdrop you can see is a mass of books that I have a habit of buying but never quite getting around to read them all, but I love the fact that I have them nonetheless. And I'm really pleased to be here.
Thank you, David. I'm very envious of your bookshelves. And finally, we have David Wilson, who's Director of Bradford UNESCO City of Film, representing the city on an international level as part of the UNESCO Creative Cities Network. He is also an expert advisor to the UK Commission to UNESCO and works with many partners to bring about positive social and economic impact for the people of Bradford and the UK. Hello, David.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name's David Wilson. In terms of a description, I've just turned 50. I'm a white male. I've got lockdown hair, which I'm keeping because it's a little bit rock and roll. I wear glasses and I'm sat in front of the majestic City Hall in Bradford, which has been used as a film location on many occasions. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that and how that connects to sustainable development.
Great, thank you so much, and delighted to have you all here with us today. So I'm going to start with a simple question to each of you, and I'll start with Sophie. So we would be interested to hear more about the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act in Wales and its alignment to the SDGs. And as the world's only Commissioner for Future Generations, which is a pretty cool title, I have to say, how do you ensure policy is informed by people, place and practice? So over to you.
Great. Well, I'm hoping that I might be able to share some slides to answer that question. Hopefully you might be seeing the slides. Sure.
Yes, we can see your slides.
Brilliant. Okay, so as you said, I'm very proud to be the only Future Generations Commissioner in the world. I thought it was the coolest job title in the world until I met the Minister for Happiness in the UAE. Some competition there, but also it's quite lonely being the only Future Generations Commissioner, so I'm hopeful that I may be joined by a few more in the not too distant future, not least because the SNP in Scotland committed to having a Future Generations Act and a Commissioner in their manifesto, and also Lord John Bird, who's the founder of The Big Issue, is taking through successful in a private members ballot last week in the UK Parliament, so some promising developments there. So what is our Future Generations Act? Well, put simply, it requires 44 of our main institutions in Wales, including the Welsh Government, but also our local authorities, our health boards, the Arts Council, Public Health Wales and so on, to demonstrate how they are seeking to meet today's needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So obviously that could cover anything really, but enshrines this really important principle that we don't do very well across international policy making of how do you make sure that the things we're doing now are not going to, not going to really jeopardize the future for those coming behind us. How are we going to make sure that we're good ancestors, if you like? And it also sets out 7 national wellbeing goals. Again, you wouldn't think the fact that a country has a set of legally binding long-term goals for the country was particularly unique or groundbreaking, but in fact it is. And this is another reason why we need a piece of legislation, because most countries, including the UK, veer from one political party manifesto to the next, short-term election cycles, and that's why we see some of the challenges that we're in the middle of now. So the climate crisis, for example, the inequality gap growing, etc., because we're not taking that long-term approach and we don't have these set of national goals. Well, these are our national goals here in Wales. You'll see that a Wales of vibrant culture and thriving Welsh language is one of our national wellbeing goals. I also just want to pull out the definition around prosperity. So it's my strong belief that an obsession with GDP is not faring us well at all. And you'll see here that our statutory definition in Wales of prosperity doesn't talk about GDP at all. So it's a productive, innovative, low carbon society which uses resources efficiently and proportionately, acts on climate change, allows people to take advantage of wealth generated through securing decent work. So all of those things, if you pull those out, take us in quite a different more progressive direction in Wales. And of course the fact that we have 4 pillars of well-being: social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being, again makes our legislation unique. And in fact, although we drew from the UN Sustainable Development Goals, culture was a critical part of what matters to people in Wales, and these goals were developed in a national conversation with the citizens of Wales. There's then a toolbox, if you like, of the ways in which we should work in the legislation. So we should be planning for the long term, recognising the long-term impact of the things that we do and the decisions that we take. We should be preventing problems from occurring or getting worse. So often we just park our ambulance at the bottom of a cliff and wait for people to fall off, and then our National Health Service will patch them up. But actually, if we did this thing on integration, if we recognise the connections, for example, and the benefits that culture and creativity can bring to skills, which which help us to get decent work, poverty being the one biggest factor in terms of our ill health. You can see those connections there. If we recognise that actually social prescribing, giving people a sense of agency and connection back to their communities, also crucial to people's health, we would start to be making those connections and not just putting sticking plasters on things when they go wrong. So integrating our thinking across our 7 wellbeing goals, collaborating with across the public sector, private sector, and the third sector, and then involving citizens in decision making. And some of the things that have, you know, a really interesting example of where the Act is driving that sort of different behaviour. One of our health boards in Swansea are using creative professionals to work with people who have put complaints in about their care, to help them tell their story, using storytelling to help them tell their story. And that is both a kind of, you know, a cathartic, I suppose, exercise for the individual. It's easier for them to do it in that way, but it's also incredibly compelling and powerful when the people who need to take decisions to change our services hear things being played back to them in that way. So this is where we see culture as a kind of preventative mechanism. So I've talked about the sort of issues around ill health. The World Health Organization identifies that about 19% of what makes a difference between the health, or for the health inequality gap. So, for example, I'm talking to you from Cardiff. I live in a place called Whitchurch, which is in the suburbs. If I travel about 3 or 4 miles down the road to the inner cities, you know, more urban suburbs or parts of Cardiff, there's every chance I could live 10 years less just by virtue of where I grow up. So actually using culture and this sort of sense of agency, 19% of what makes a difference to health and well-being. So we need to stop seeing culture and creativity as the nice to have and see it as kind of critically important for delivering future fit healthcare services and many other services. We can also see there a Wales of cohesive communities and the benefits there. Some of the case studies I'm going to talk about here. We have an arts and health programme in Wales, which is doing a whole range of things, from the setup of arts galleries in our hospitals to social prescribing into cultural activities for those people who might be lonely, isolated, have mental health problems, and so on. So a huge programme there. And in fact, the new health minister that we have in Wales, because we've just had an election, is a big advocate of social prescribing and the ability of culture to bring about some significant change. What's really interesting during COVID, I put the COVID response there, the Arts Council worked with a number of creative freelancers to provide small grants, to provide some stability in terms of income, but actually then got them doing Zoom storytelling with children, dancing outside and you know, and performing outside the homes of older people, creating kind of street-based movement classes and so on. All of those things are things that we don't want to lose as part of the kind of response to COVID. We need to build them back into the recovery. And what's so interesting about that is linked to our Act. We do a national survey to look at how we're progressing on our 7 national wellbeing goals every 2 years. 2 years ago, people were asked whether there was a sense of community in their area, and 52% of people said that there was. That was rerun last September in the middle of the pandemic, and that had gone up to 74%. So an increase of 22% when we start focusing on community, interacting, public services and communities and creatives and third sector organisations working together in a much better way. We also see the National Library of Wales, which doesn't often feature in how could that be providing a response on social care, doing things like the Living Memories project. So pulling some of their collection and pushing it out to people in older people's homes to help with dementia and so on. And our National Museum, who have been working with our healthcare system in terms of the field hospitals and so on, to put some of their collections in there. So just briefly before I end, I want to say a little bit about COVID recovery, because I think that culture and creativity has got to be at the absolute centre of our recovery. And I don't like the phrase build back better, because I think that that suggests that what we had before was okay and we just need to do it a bit better. I think we need to fundamentally reconstruct, and part of that reconstruction needs to make sure that we've got culture at the centre of it. So we need to get away with our obsession of anchor stores and the shopping offer in town and city centres, and start reimagining our town and city centres as cultural hubs and places that people want to go to immerse themselves in culture, not just in buying things that perhaps we don't really need. We need to think about how do we connect our cultural professionals and our creatives into that reconstruction mission with public services. So one of the things that we've been working on with the government as part of the requirements of our Future Generations Act is the development of a freelancer and public bodies pledge. So Wales was the only country that gave a payment to freelancers during the COVID pandemic, and we've asked them to sign up to and tell us what their skills are, so that we compare them with our public bodies. Imagine we're building a brand new hospital in the centre of Cardiff, and imagine if you built in a creative professional to work alongside the team, the clinicians and so on who are doing that, and how different that would be from the outset. So this is our vision of how this freelancers pledge will work. Of course, the creative economy, Wales, the creative industries in Wales contribute a huge amount to our economy, and we need to be focusing there. Creative catch-up. So children have lost so much during the pandemic in terms of interactions with their friends, development in the early years in particular, and of course their schooling. The worst possible thing that I think we could do to our kids is to do a catch-up programme based on reading and writing and arithmetic. What we need to do is to focus on the fact that creativity is going to be one of the most crucial skills for the future, and how can we be working with our freelancers pledge to bring in our creative professionals as part of a creative and active catch-up programme for our children and young people. I've talked about preventative healthcare, and there are loads of opportunities there. And then climate and nature. We're in the middle of a climate emergency. Yes, we need some massive interventions from our government, but we also need people on board. And the power of culture, of creativity around behavioural change is absolutely huge. So what we need to be doing here, back to that kind of integration and collaboration, is ask not what you can do for culture, but what culture can do for you. How can culture be part of framing the debate around climate change? How can it help with behavioural change? What is the response to keeping people out of waiting lists in our hospitals because they're already got a 5-year backlog, by using culture as preventative healthcare? And how can we reimagine our towns and city centres? Some huge opportunities here, and I think we're incredibly lucky in Wales to have a framing around how we can do that in a way which is going to benefit both our current and future generations.
Thank you so much, Sophie. You've covered a huge amount of ground in that presentation. I just want to pick up on sort of being the good ancestors for the future, finding culture as agency for health and climate issues and others, and then the COVID response and how storytelling and cultural activity can be part of the solution. So thank you. I'm now going to go to Claire McColgan. As part of your role, you're currently leading on the recovery in Liverpool through culture, so it's a nice segue. What is being planned so far, and what more can be done to raise awareness of the role of arts for sustainable development in general?
Thank you. I've got a very short presentation that I'm going to try to share my screen. Can you see that?
We can't have a presentation yet.
So you can see it, can you?
No, we can't.
Oh, right. Okay, don't worry. Let me go back. No, no. Don't worry, I'll just
No,
talk.
we can't, sorry.
That's okay, I'll just talk. So for those of you who don't know Liverpool, Liverpool is a city that has kind of massive highs and massive lows. It's a very interesting city to work in. I've worked here for the last 25 years now. So just to take you back a bit, when we Liverpool in the kind of late 90s was called was how some people termed it, the basket case of local authorities, which isn't a good thing at all. It's a very bad thing, in fact. So everything that could be wrong with the city was viewed to be wrong with Liverpool. And what the council at the time decided to do was use this competition called European Capital of Culture to transform the future of the city. And at that point, it was quite a brave thing to do, because although we had a great cultural offer within Liverpool, we've got 7 national museums, we've got Beatles, we've got a huge international reputation. Kind of nationally, our reputation wasn't fantastic. So the kind of politicians thought a great thing to do would be put culture at the heart of everything, do a culture bid, and at least it would focus everyone, get everyone in the same direction. This is 20 years ago now, nearly. And it was an incredible experience, because the bid at that time, lots of people who bid for European Capital of Culture at that point in time treated it as a marketing initiative. So it was simply about saying how great your city was. And we knew we had a lot of work to do. So we focused very much on a creative communities programme that was about engaging communities on their terms in their areas with the arts that they wanted to see, not what people wanted to do to them. We developed a whole capital culture bid. It was very, very about the people. They were engaged in it and they really wanted it, and we won. And it was a great success. You know, the journey to be European Capital Culture was full of lots of ups and downs. But actually, what culture did by putting it at the heart of regeneration, what it really did was focus everyone's minds. And because we were opening on the 1st of January 2008, everything kind of had to be ready. So it was putting a show on. You know, your stage needed to be set. Things needed to be done. You had to kind of get the city centre and the city itself up and ready to go. So things like the big Liverpool One development, which is a big, very beautiful shopping development in the city, the arena and conference centre, the refurbishment of the theatres, the dance centres, they all had to be ready to go. So I think in some ways it was a really good thing for Liverpool, because not only was the year fantastic and it set the city off on a completely different trajectory than the one that it had been going on, but it also kind of, in some ways, before the crash came in 2008, we were very busy partying in 2008. So we kind of missed the crash a little bit, and the city was ready. And I think lots of places you go, okay, done that now, let's move on, let's change, let's not think about sustainability, let's move on from culture and do something else. And Liverpool never did that. It's used culture as the rocket fuel for regeneration. It's the thread that kind of binds everything together. It feeds through everything. And we've done, I think, a few things really well. One is we support our cultural organisations, because they're the bedrock of everything that happens, and without them there would be no cultural offer. We support them well and properly. We fund them more than any other British city, and we fund them well. We also do kind of big, major kind of set piece events, which kind of bring kind of an international attention to the city. So for some of you will remember the Giants who've come to the city and walked the city 3 times. We closed the whole city down for that completely, from traffic, from everything, and artists take over the whole centre. We brought 3 queens down the river, 3 big, huge cruise ships down the river. 1 million people came to see them. And there were moments of international attention, really, that kind of give us the international perspective, but also kind of local people feel hugely proud of their city being shown on an international stage. So they're the 2 things we do well. Just a bit of context in that. So I'm in a very privileged position to have been here a long time, actually. And a kind of the development of culture has been so strong here that now 48% of our business rates come from the culture and visitor economy. So that's 270 million. So for those of you that work for organisations or struggle with kind of putting your case forward, you can quote Liverpool, because 270 million goes into healthcare, it goes into education, it goes into making the roads safe. It doesn't come back into my budget. It goes into making a city work. It makes the whole city work properly. So 48% of a city's economy coming from our sector is quite a responsibility. And I think over COVID, what we found is that the creative industries and the cultural sector are the first to come up with ideas. So my whole events team went and did mass testing, which we piloted in November here as a city. They've developed the food hub, they've developed the volunteering hub. Those creative skills have been really useful. But one of the big things that we did, which fits into the sustainability agenda as well, was create a programme called Without Walls. Hugely successful. We shut down 3 streets within the city centre, pedestrianised them very quickly. And we created a fund, a small fund, 450,000 up to £3,000 for every restaurant and bar to bid in to buy outdoor furniture. This was this time last year. And that when you're a little restaurant or a bar and you can't even work out whether you're going to be able to keep anyone employed, the last thing you want to be thinking about is your outdoor furniture. So we bought that for the whole sector, and it enabled them to bring people back off furlough. 60% of them opened when they said they wouldn't have done if they hadn't had that. So huge success. And then more recently, and I think that kind of sets the stage for COVID recovery, was around the events research pilots, which you may have seen. So you may have seen that as we opened the first nightclub with no social distancing, and we did the first kind of outdoor gig in Sefton Park with no social distancing and with lateral flow testing. I think for me, kind of what I would pose in terms of the future of cultural activity within cities is that will be a new defined relationship with directors of public health and place, which wasn't the same before. For those of you that in roles like mine, you know, the conversation you'd have with the director of public health would be around too much sugar or or selling alcohol at events, you know, all those kind of things. That's gone now. The relationship between cultural organisations and public health is going to be fundamental to our future. I can't reiterate that enough. You know, public health officials will have the potential to close things down, to open things up, to support organisations in getting back on their feet. That relationship will be absolutely central. And another thing that I found really interesting over COVID is the relationship between cultural sector, especially in Liverpool, the universities who've done all the research around testing, and again, back to public health. So I think things will change post-COVID. I think culture will be a massive part of our recovery because it's the way that we bring people together. It's the way that we share stories, we share ideas, we share humanity. But I also think that we can't just shake the shaker and everything go back to how it was pre-COVID, because it wasn't all right. You know, some of our art forms were dying. Education within schools around culture is going. Look at the stuff that's happening around universities at the moment. Those brains, those creative minds, those people who are going to create the next generation of cities, how they look and how they feel, need nurturing. And I think collectively we need to think about how we do that in a world that is going back to kind of catching up, as Sophie just said, as you know, as being reading, writing and arithmetic. It's not. Creative minds will bring us out of this, and scientists will bring us out of this actually, and that's what we need to concentrate on. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Claire. Some very good provocations for us on health, science, but also showing how Liverpool has really had that cultural thread throughout everything that binds everything together. So thanks for sharing. I'm going to move to David now. We're running slightly late, just for us to be aware. And if we could all speak slowly for the BSL interpretation, that would be helpful. Thank you. So David, you currently chair many organisations that are the driving force of socially engaged arts, serving the community in an inclusive and diverse way. How do you see the Sustainable Development Goals as a useful framework to connect practice with policy at different levels?
I see them as being quite crucial. I think that the goals are already prevalent in a number of the targets that many groups are now beginning to adapt to. We've seen in recent times in terms of the arts in England, the Arts Council begin to adopt in its investment principles a prioritization around the environment, and I think that therefore makes part of the connection. I think the goals have been there for a long time. When I talk to my colleagues at Voluntary Arts, we can say to ourselves, we tackle and address a number of these areas quite broadly, but when we drill down, there are particular aspects that are important to us. We have a whole range of projects around healthy living and healthy lives, and I think Claire's absolutely right when she says that going forward, health will be a critical area of concern and of interest. And I think it's taken a time for the arts to begin to become more holistic in its perspectives and therefore more inclusive. It's still a journey it's on, but certainly I think that branching out and being much more impactful in the arena of health and understanding how the arts can play a vibrant role for every individual, not just professional artists, but every individual to do and contribute and benefit from participating, I think is very important. When I talk to my colleagues at Battersea Arts Centre, for instance, they will talk about, well, we are very conscious about and concerned about the welfare of local people being able to afford to come to the arts. And so currently they have a pay what you can a program for this season's work, which is therefore saying to people, we know for some that the finances have been pretty difficult. We therefore have a sliding scale, trying to encourage individuals to give what they can, and we'll willingly work with that. A number of organizations do more than just the arts. And I think that last year or earlier this year, my schedule's all getting blurred. The Gulbenkian Award last year, acknowledging the kind of connection between the civic responsibility of arts organizations, I think was really quite important. And I hope they continue that program again. But it was about affirming that arts institutions are not just there to stage the next theatre production or the next exhibition, but have a responsibility as employers, but equally to the communities in which they're situated. It's vital that there's a sense in which we have a responsibility to grow local talent and build a sustainable, vibrant microeconomy around our institutions, if not further afield. That's something that, again, Claire referred to in terms of Liverpool, but I think in terms of local areas, everybody can begin to contribute and work together to make those areas a livable, healthy space to be in for all age groups and all communities. And this is one of the challenging things about, I think, the goals, is that there needs to be an acknowledgement that the goals are starting from a deficit position, that many communities have not been engaged, have not been brought into the terrain of shared endeavour. They have been the usual suspects of well-heeled institutions that have adopted these goals and adopted the stances, albeit because they're keen on funding, but they've often neglected elderly communities, poor communities, culturally diverse communities. And that marginalization, we've seen it act itself out in COVID, where a large number of communities don't trust major institutions and therefore are apprehensive about what they're offering and don't see themselves in their local community or in their cultural offer. So the relevance of the cultural offer is really quite important, but also seeing themselves as part of the kind of local cultural infrastructure. I'm currently on the Mayor's Commission for Diversity in the Public Realm, and I'm talking here on my own status as an individual, not as a rep of them. But one of the key things that I think is vitally important for all of us is to start thinking in terms of what's the future we're creating. And I think the SDGs help us work towards that kind of future visioning that's inclusive, that's integrated. And that therefore, and in order to do that very well, we have to address contested histories so we can get past the neglect of history and into a space which is about a shared future. And I think that, again, the SDGs talk about enabling communities to be shared and sustained in Goal 11. They talk about building an environment in which discrimination is addressed. So I think the SDGs, again, link directly to what is important for our organizations for the future. The project in Brixton where I'm working, we are under construction. We open in November, our fingers crossed, and that's going to be playing this role which we're describing as being a cultural hub, trying to do more than just the arts, trying to do more than just engage in local activity, but to be able to be a real vibrant part of the social fabric as well.
Thank you, David. And yeah, I mean, the relevance of the SDGs to the communities, to citizens, and of the cultural offer are really important, and that inclusive future that we're all working towards, and how the SDGs provide that pathway or a framework or a lens, however we want to see it. So thank you. And last but not least, we'll come to David Wilson. I think you have a short video to show us highlighting the UNESCO Creative Cities and your international work, as well as your leadership of Bradford UNESCO City of Film. So I'll pass over to you.
Thank you. Just bear with me while I start this video. According to UNESCO, by the year 2050, 7 out of 10 people in developing countries will live in urban areas, and cities will play a fundamental role in our common pursuit of global sustainable development. Cities are hubs of human activity, linking regions and increasingly the rest of the world. They are places where economic, social, cultural and environmental dimensions of sustainable development converge and interact. And the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development recognises and highlights the importance of the local dimension in achieving sustainable development. So in short, you can't have sustainable development without community development. To achieve the 2030 Agenda, cities are encouraged to use culture and creativity as a driver to reinforce creative economy, social harmony, human development, technological innovation, and scientific development. I realise I'm echoing what many of our previous speakers have already said. So we've got a common approach to this. The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic has further illustrated the essential role of culture and creativity in society, but also in the recovery from the pandemic. So created in 2004, the UNESCO Creative Cities Network now includes 246 cities across 80 member states. Each city is designated in one of 7 creative fields, and they are design, film, gastronomy, literature, media art, music, and craft and folk art. So the UNESCO Creative Cities try to integrate culture and creativity into their policies, actions, and plans. And the main objective of the network is to strengthen international cooperation between cities, develop partnerships, strengthen culture and creative industries, and stimulate innovation and creativity. So how does that work at a local level? Well, it starts with community development and access to events. That was the Bradford Family Film Festival you could see there. But also learning and education runs throughout. And this is the Bradford Film Literacy Programme. 70% of young people involved in this scheme using film to increase literacy standards in schools. Then working with community groups. So here you see a clip of Sudanese refugee community in Bradford. And you know,
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Sorry, I've got Siri coming in halfway through. This is a project where a film was made with the Sudanese community, which has now been screened at film festivals around the world. And responding to David Bryan's comment about major institutions, this is bringing marginalised communities into the fore. Then there's professional development, working alongside professionals. That guy's Michael Hurst, who wrote Vikings, working alongside the Bradford Film Office, and everything that we develop in terms of our film offer, from Peaky Blinders to Bollywood and everything in between, giving graduates experience of working on professional products, but also bringing in local businesses, hotels, into the whole creative area. And screen tourism, don't underestimate how we can use culture and creativity to drive inward investment and tourism. And then finally, on an international state, working with cities around the world to share some common values and common good. One example of that now, our revised Masters in Filmmaking in Bradford, which is in partnership with UNESCO and will respond to some of the challenges of the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and great to hear a bit of music as well during this session. So we have 15 minutes left, and I was hoping to share some of the survey responses from your registrations. I think we'll skip straight to the questions though, to make the most of our fantastic panel with us today. So I'll just invite them to join me on the screen. And anyone who is participating today, if you would like to add any questions you have for the panel in the chat, and we'll try to come to them. We have noticed there's been quite a lot of conversation around the building back better and this concept. So an open question to you as that came up as a challenge. How can building back better as a strategy be properly understood and worked towards? What needs to change in that statement or in the culture of building back better? Sophie.
To dive in, seeing as it was my provocative statement, I suppose. I think that it's very easy to talk about to use a soundbite like building back better, and there's a range of areas where, I've been advising the Welsh Government. I should say that I'm independent of the government. My job is to sort of scrutinise what they're doing and provide advice to them. And, their reconstruction strategy talks about a prosperous, green and equal recovery. There's nothing that you can, complain about there. Who doesn't want those things? The problem is when you scratch beneath the surface on some of those things, we're not actually putting in place the things that are needed to deliver those things. So, for example, if we look at diversity in a range of future fit or future focused industries, so for the green recovery, if you like, actually what we're looking at is investing in areas which are predominated by white men. And so if we want a prosperous, green and equal recovery, we've got to put some really concerted effort and action into making sure that we're both expanding skills in those areas and diversifying. Now, I'm sure it's very similar in terms of people who access culture and arts, people who work in culture and arts and so on. And so the point that I'm making is it's not enough to just come up with these kind of sound bites. You have to go right down to the next layer to see whether those things are actually being taken forward in practice. And, I do, fundamentally, I often say that we don't just need to do the same thing better. We need to do fundamentally better things, because when we start with things like our obsession with GDP, that we grow and we grow and we grow and we redistribute later, that just doesn't happen, which is why we've got the wealth, the same amount of wealth across the world concentrated in the hands of 62 people as we have the 3.6 billion poorest people. So just doing stuff better, to me, is not enough. I think culture can be a real part of shaking up a system that doesn't work.
Thank you. Anyone else want to reflect on that? David Wilson.
Yeah, just very briefly, I think partly, many people have commented about the Sustainable Development Goals being this kind of roadmap out of the pandemic, if you like. And I think it's partly up to local policymakers to seize the moment, really, and take a lead from places like Liverpool that have done it so well in terms of the use of culture to really drive the sustainable development of the city. You look at things like arts and health, which are massively effective, and anyone involved in any kind of arts and health initiative realise that, but it's so massively underfunded and not made sort of part of core core policy. So I would appeal to local policymakers to really seize the moment now. We can't wait for national governments to do this. We need to do it at a local level.
Can I just quickly jump in and say that words have to be very pragmatic. I think what's dogged the arts world and dogged development per se is short-termism. I think it's a phrase that Sophie raised earlier on, and a lot of funding has been short-term funding, which in turn creates a kind of conserve environment in which those who are already in the established make bids for the resources because they are quick to respond, and the usual can therefore get the resources, and they're trusted because they are seen to be, you know, the usual suspects. But the usual suspects often mean they exclude working class communities who are not part of their workforce. They exclude local people in their communities for employment, as well as diversity. I think that the issue for me is about, if this is to be real, building back better, then we've got to do better than we've done before. Because we know we've not done the best we can, and we know that there's been a whole series of short-term training programs which are quite patronizing and undermining, as well as a reluctance to employ. We're seeing right now, due to more recent political campaigns, a drive to diversify boards of arts institutions, and people going out looking for leadership to be on their boards where they weren't looking before. We're finding organizations now begin to recruit more diverse staff from all backgrounds, and I think that's important. But the issue here is, this is not about building back, this is about building forward, because those things were not being done in any shape or form, even when policies were there, where legislation was there. So whatever the motivation is right now, we've got to build a better future, and that better future requires that we are looking long-term and integrated, and not just sound bites for the moment. And I hope we're up beyond sound bites.
Great, thank you. Couldn't agree more with that, and maybe build forward better, even if the alliteration isn't quite there, is a better way of seeing things, or building a better future, brighter future, or you know, our sustainable future. There was also a similar question in the questions we got through registration, and I'd just like to ask this one because it's taking it slightly further. So, how does the policy environment need to change in order to better support culture's contribution to sustainable development? And what doesn't policy understand about culture, and vice versa? Where is that gap, I suppose? Claire, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all depends on what way you're talking about policy. I think in local government, you see from the interest there is around UK City of Culture, the work that Coventry's done in the UK, the work that Hull did, the work that Londonderry did. There is a real understanding from I think especially local government, that culture is absolutely intrinsic to the way that you develop a sense of place, because without it you haven't got one. So I think that I think the interesting thing that will happen is as we're all coming out of COVID, there will be a flurry of positioning from cities in the UK, especially around kind of internationalism as well. So kind of how we all kind of find our space internationally. And I think sometimes I think the DCMS, the government department, have done really well over COVID. Out of all the departments, they've delivered very quickly. They've delivered well on terms of cultural recovery, and in terms of these events research pilots, it's been a brilliant relationship actually, because they've actually really been interested in the research part of it rather than just the events and the pilots. So I think there is a really positive future about how culture is seen. But I think, you know, times changed, don't they? And we had to go down a very economic route to prove economically how valuable culture was. I think over the pandemic, people have seen, and it's been proven on how the kind of emotional recovery of the country will depend on us being able to tell our stories and heal each other, really. So I think it could be very exciting over the next year. And I don't think there is a big policy gap anymore between culture and other parts of both government and local government. I think it's changed. I think it's changed a lot over the last couple of years.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, Sophie, we've definitely seen that happen in Wales. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're seeing some of this in Wales, but, you know, we still have some huge challenges. So some of the things that I've been calling out recently is we've just had a brilliant new sort of development of our sort of central plaza outside our main train station, you know, the capital city train station, and you still walk out from the train station onto a concrete slab and are met by a pret-a-manger. Now, actually, you know, if we were truly, if the town planners and the economy department and so on were really thinking that through, and this is part of the point that I want to make, they were thinking it through, they would be giving reduced business rates for small, you know, social enterprises and, you know, creative, you know, startups and those sorts of things. So that's what greets you when you arrive in Cardiff, not a Starbucks and a Pret. The issue with that, I think, is that what we're trying to do is to unpick, you know, not just, you know, one generation's worth of kind of bad habits. We're trying to unpick a multitude of those. We're trying to get people to think beyond their immediate silo, and a part of the immediate silo is being kind of, right, how do I maximize the, you know, the income of this or the economic value of this, rather than how do I maximize the well-being value for the particular thing that I'm doing. And one of the other things that I've put forward to government is something which we call, it's taken from a model elsewhere, it's called the Ministry of Possibilities, which is sort of lovingly known as the Harry Potter recommendation in my office. But essentially what that is how do you start to bring in those new ideas? Because if you're a, you know, a town planner or an economic development officer or a social worker or whatever you might be, you know what you know. How do we create an environment when we're interacting beyond our boundaries? So the Ministry of Possibility idea is, how do you bring in across, and we've got the benefit of those 7 national wellbeing goals, when you're starting to develop a new policy on how are we going to get ourselves out of the mess of the 5-year backlog of waiting lists, and we don't want to be adding to it in the NHS.
Hello everyone, apologies for that technical issue. I'm hoping we didn't lose too many people and we can carry on the conversation. We have run out of time for this panel discussion, but I'd like to just invite David Wilson and David Bryan to say a final word, a parting thought with us before we move to some breakout rooms.
Shall I lead then, David?
Yes, please.
I think this is a really important conversation we're having that is about joining together a varied range of interests that is multidimensional in terms of how it improves and advances our lives. My key commitment and concern and interest in terms of the agencies that I chair is about building from the ground up, and that's not from the ground up exclusively or alone, but in partnership. I think we do need a baseline infrastructure so we can grow and progress and be sustainable going forward. I think that some of our existing institutions, as David has pointed out and Claire in Liverpool, some of them can be pioneering in terms of their connections with community groups, but more of them need to do that. And then lastly, my other comment is that we've got across the country really rich communities with connections in different parts of the UK as well as internationally. And I think we don't make enough of the kind of potential for exciting exchange of internal tourism as well as global. And I think that's to our detriment. We've been looking externally all the time and not about how we enrich and elevate what we already have. So for me, I think this is a great debate about breaking down barriers and building for the future, but it must have a very firm and integrated local base.
Okay, thank you. And David Wilson?
Yeah, I mean, just to echo that, just before we kind of lost the connection there, I think we were talking a little bit about integrated policies. So getting the planning department to speak more to the people that work in culture, to speak to people that work in economic development. And that's where some of the initiatives like UK City of Culture, Bradford is bidding to be UK City of Culture 2025. That's where some of those initiatives really do come into play. And we've already said that, you know, public health will be seen very, very differently from now on after this pandemic. So let that be our starting point. public health and culture coming together. We know that the high street faces major challenges and that none of us want to come out of the train station and just see the same old, you know, the replication of a city street, the same everywhere we go. So let's focus on our individuality, what makes us special, what makes Bradford different to Liverpool, different to Edinburgh, different to York, Glasgow, and let's, you know, cities across the world, as UNESCO creative cities, we are trying to do that using culture and creativity as a driver for sustainable development.
Thank you. We also have Claire still with us, hopefully. Are you still there, Claire?
I am. I'm very glad I didn't do that technically. Usually it's me who gets all the technology wrong. So I'm delighted.
Oh, apologies.
No, I kind of haven't. I think there's just a massive opportunity, isn't there, post-COVID for everyone to make culture in whichever place they work kind of central moving forward. And I think that most enlightened cities and places will know that the only way that they have a really strong future is to put culture and creativity at the heart of everything they do. And I think cities across the world are waking up to that. Some are much more far advanced than we are in the UK. But I think it's a really exciting time for anyone involved in creative industries. Very positive.
Great, thank you. And thanks to all our panelists today, to Sophie, who I think unfortunately we lost in the process, David Wilson, David Bryan, Claire McColgan, and to all of you who have participated and managed to stay with us through our technical difficulties. So apologies for that again. A huge thank you to those who have been organising this event with me. So Angelica, Angie, Andrea and Emma, as well as our BSL interpreters, Katie and Eddie, and our live transcript writers. So Kim and Kate have been backstage throughout this process.